The Rams-Vikings wildcard round playoff game has been relocated to Arizona. We're going to tell you what that means for the Rams and the biggest keys to a Rams win over the Vikings. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you hear podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor. Subscribe to the fastest growing Rams YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, and also drop your predictions down below. And also, what is your reaction to the Rams-Vikings wildcard round game being moved to Arizona? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, 24/7 sports, SI, Dodgers Nation, Locked On Rams, do some NFL radio for Westwood One. And of course, I'm joined by the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, the host of the Rams pre-half and post-game show. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, we are talking about the decision to move Monday night's game between the Rams and Vikings, the wild card round matchup, to Arizona, what the Rams practice schedule looks like, the ticket situation, how many Rams fans will be in attendance. We're also looking at the keys to this game and why you can't take a lot away from the Rams' Week 8 win over the Vikings in this one. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Travis. So like we said last episode, first and foremost, all of our thoughts, prayers go out to first responders, everyone impacted by the tragedy here in the Southland, the wildfires burning, and kind of how it impacts the Rams. We talked about in the last show, would they move the game? The answer is yes. Monday night's game between the Rams and the Vikings will be played in Glendale, Arizona, the home of the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I don't want to say I'm surprised, but I think it just speaks to the scope of the destruction that has taken place in our city, Doug, that obviously, like you mentioned, and like many, many people have said, but allow me to add my voice to the chorus. It's just unfathomable what has happened in the city, and looking at the news coverage and seeing just the unbelievable destruction on the west side in the Pasadena area and everywhere that these fires are burning. It's just, it's really, really remarkable and scary. And like you said, our thoughts go to everybody that has been displaced and lost property and lives, and the first responders that are keeping everybody safe. So thank you to everybody. And we're thinking of all of you. But like I said, when you and I spoke last, the NFL really doesn't like to move stuff. They really don't like to move stuff. They really don't like to postpone things. I mean, when you think about it, and I'm not trying to make lights or comparison, but the things that I can think of off the top of my head, the reason that things have been postponed are 9/11, pandemics, things like this. And this falls into that category. It's just it's a natural disaster of epic proportions, and I think it's the right decision that they moved. And as much as you love the Rams, I love the Rams, and everybody, all of our everydayers that listen to this podcast, we're all big football fans, but obviously it is not nearly at the top of the list of the most important things to get done. And if this is what will help the city, if this is what will keep people safe, and allow people to continue to fight those fires and get their lives back on track, then I fully support it, and I understand why they did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, selfishly, you might think, a home playoff game, what does this mean for your team and the success they could have or not have in that game, and the fan support that could be there as well. And then it just creeps in the zooming out in the bigger picture of all this and just how significant, how severe this is. I mean, the biggest wildfire in California, I mean, just everything that's related to it. Do want to point out, too, the Rams did announce today that the Kroenke family is going to donate $1 million to the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation, and also they're going to give their support to the American Red Cross, and also the proceeds of the 50-50 raffle during the Rams-Vikings game will benefit the LAFD and American Red Cross, with 50% of the jackpot total going to those two funds. And you also have the Texans, Vikings, some other teams have also contributed $1 million as well. But yeah, I mean, just kind of looking at this game, it is a familiar stadium. It is a stadium that the Rams have had a ton of success at. Since 2017, the Rams 7-1 at State Farm Stadium in Arizona. If you go further than that, the Rams all time, even going back to the St. Louis days, are 12-7 at the Cardinals Stadium. So they have had success there. It is familiar. And I think, look, that's the number one thing that you kind of look to spin a positive for the Rams as it pertains to this.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of parts about this, about being displaced, about having to go on the road or even to a neutral site, the way that this is set up, that is far from ideal. But like you said, Doug, so what? Oh well, right? If this is the worst thing that, you got a playoff game has to go, it's, in the grand scheme of things, who really cares? I mean, would it be better to have it here in LA? Of course. And is it whatever advantage of being home probably neutralized? Yeah, probably. But again, okay, is that more important than what's been going on? I would say that it's not. The Rams are a good team. They can go on the road. They can find a way to win this. The Vikings, I know that the point number jumped up a little bit as far as Las Vegas goes from what it was when it was supposed to be played at SoFi to what it is now in the desert. But these are all, very minor concerns to me. You want everybody, and again, the Rams, their training facility is up in that part of the city. It's in that northern LA County part where they do a lot of their work in the Valley and Woodland Hills. So I'm sure a number of their players and family members of the players and staffers and coaches and everybody that works for the Rams, I'm sure, have had a lot of stuff on their minds. And, we'll talk about these games and we'll talk about what has to happen, what did happen, what will happen. We'll get here on, Monday night, Tuesday morning, and break down whatever happens on Monday night. But it's hard to really chew on it too much with everything that's going on, because it's simply not the most important thing that's happening right now.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to point out too was, look, the Rams, their fan base, they've reacted very strongly to the news and just pivoting to going to Arizona. In the very first hour, according to the Los Angeles Rams and their season ticket members, they purchased 25,000 tickets to the game in the first hour. And then a few hours later, it was already at 52,000. So when you look at a stadium in Glendale that holds 63,400, you're still going to have a vast majority of Rams fans that are going to be in the stands. Kevin Demoff, he also put out on Twitter that the Rams have secured 15 buses for 750 season ticket members. So they're going to charter buses to get fans to and from the game to Glendale. Makes you wonder, though, Travis. I mean, you've gone to a lot of games in your life. It's a Monday Night Football game. If you've been to Monday Night Football, it's kind of one of the things like, yeah, I'll go to work in the morning and then I'll bounce early, right? After one, it's like, where the hell did Travis go? Where'd Doug go? Like, we're at Monday Night Football. This is a different situation. You got to take a whole day off, a whole weekend off. That could have an impact as well.
Sure, it can. It is complicated and it's far away. And, not everybody has the means to buy a ticket, to jump on an airplane or to hop on a bus and get out there and spend the night, maybe come back the next day or turn around and come back the same night. It's going to throw off a day or two, if not a little bit longer than that. I think if you're looking for some silver lining here, and you got to squint to find it for sure, the Rams have had some moments where they've had to kind of rally at different points. You go back to when they were supposed to play at Mexico City a few years ago, and I believe it was a Shakira concert where they tore up the field in Mexico City, so they weren't able to play there at the last minute. They played in Los Angeles. It turns out at the Coliseum, it was the same week where there was a shooting near their facility at Kowloon. There were fires at the same time, at the same point, and they rallied around it. They had a lot going on at the same time, and the Rams found a way to rally and put together one of the great performances. That was that Monday night game against the Chiefs that was just bonkers crazy, 54-51. So, the Rams have been through displacement before. They've been through have a tragedy before. So hopefully they can lean on some of that experience and make the best of an awful situation in Arizona.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The Rams have faced adversity. It's also a team that plays in a stadium where sometimes there's a lot of fans from opposing teams, and using silent counts, you're still able to overcome and win games that way. And just want to point out, too, the Rams will be going to Arizona today earlier. So typically on a road game, they're leaving the day before. And that's how you're doing. You're going to your hotel, you're going to the game before. This is totally different. They're going to Arizona earlier so they can use the Cardinals practice facility on Saturday. Of course, the air quality in Los Angeles was poor. So I think that definitely is something that's helpful from that standpoint, kind of getting solidified there. And look, I just want to tell Cardinals fans too that after the Rams win this game, they're going to have won a playoff game at their home stadium more recently than them. So maybe you could tell Alex Clancy that too. A little trash talk for the NFC preview show next year. But coming up next, we're talking more Rams displacement to go into Arizona. How big of a factor will that be? And will we get the best version of Matthew Stafford? Because they're going to need it if they want a deep run. And also, do we take anything from that Week 8 win over the Vikings into this one? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, that is a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated or stressful. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers. No more wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give you taxes, or you should say TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on what really matters. You won't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. So ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Also, it is playoff time. And if you are like me, you're going to want to make the most of these final weeks of playoff action, football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. So if you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. So I've been playing for a while now. I love it. I did last night, the game, Notre Dame and Penn State. There's another game tonight. There's all sorts of NFL stuff, right? You can bet on the Lions. You can bet on the Eagles. You can, of course, bet on the Rams and the Vikings. There's all sorts of stuff going on right here. Special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. One more time. Download the app today. Use that code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday and sometimes on the weekends. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, here in our second segment, we're going to start to dive into this matchup a little bit. And I think the very first question you have to ask if you're a Rams fan heading into this one is, what version of Matthew Stafford are you getting? Are you getting the Matthew Stafford that really carried this team to a Super Bowl back in 2021? He's played in 5 playoff games for the Rams, 3 of those 300-plus yard games. I mean, you look at a Matthew Stafford that has had a ton of success throughout his career. He does go through these slumps. And the truth of the matter is, he hasn't had a game where he's had over 200 yards passing since you beat the Bills in that barn burner there. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest question. Do you get a Matthew Stafford that's pushing the ball downfield, that's accurate, that has a connection with Puka and Cooper and everyone that he's trying to get involved in? That's going to determine largely if this is a deep run for the Rams.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the Rams offense, I think that Stafford is the place to look. And I think why you can be optimistic about it is he has the full complement of all of his weapons really for, I don't want to say the first time, but for the last part of the season is where everything has been available to him. You're going to have Puka Nacua at full strength. You know, you've got Cooper Kupp coming off of a week off to kind of get refreshed and ready. Tyler Higbee is back in the fold and making plays for the Rams at the tight end position. And of course, you got Kyron Williams, who has been doing what he's doing. and you expect that offensive line to be, at least at the beginning of the game, fully healthy and ready to go. So, Sean McVay has had the better part of 2 weeks to start putting a game plan together. There was really nothing of note against the Seahawks in the final week. They've had 2 weeks to game plan for this. The Lions really have not. The Lions have had a week because they had to play a real game against the Lions. I should say the Vikings got ready for the Lions in that final week. So a lot of advantages tend towards the Rams and the offensive side of the ball. And I'm optimistic there. But I'll tell you what, D-Mac, I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to win this game because the defense is the tip of the spear. I don't think this is going to be a 35-32 or 31 sort of situation. I think if everything goes the way I'm hoping that it will go, the Rams win this game 24-20, 24-17, something like that. I don't think this is a last team to have the ball wins. If the Rams are the last team to have the ball and Matthew Stafford's got in his hands, I'm okay with that. I think he's a really talented guy and certainly capable, but this is a defensive first football team, as weird as it is in the Sean McVay era to think about it. That's what this team has been. And I think if they're going to beat the Vikings, they're going to have to do it again.
Yeah. Just saying that out loud just feels really strange, right? I mean,
it does.
Sean McVay with the talent, with the names you throw out there, and then you got a lot of young players, emerging players, a first-time defensive coordinator that's not going to be a defensive coordinator for very much longer, in my opinion, Chris Shula. So it's a credit to them. But at the end of the day, yes, the Rams are a team that they don't blow a lot of teams out. They come out slow in the first quarter. Sometimes a win tends to feel like a slog at times.
Yep.
But I do think there is a world where Matthew Stafford at this stage of his career kind of comes out firing in a lot of different ways, knowing that it's time to get going. It's time to really sink or swim, because this team is only going to make it deep. It really shocked the world if Matthew Stafford is giving you 250 to 300 yard games, in my opinion, as good as the defense has played. And kind of the one thing that I look at in the recent weeks with Stafford is the accuracy hasn't been where it is when he's at his best, but also he just hasn't been pressured. And he also has had a good running game in that stretch. He's actually being pressured on 23.8% of his dropbacks. It's the fourth lowest in the NFL, but he just hasn't been able to get it going. So there's a lot of stats that will say, wait a minute, like he's in a slump. But then if you've watched Stafford, you know that every now and then he has these 2 or 3 games where he's not at his best. He looks like he's in a funk, and then boom, snaps out of it. And it's, he's takes a backseat to know him as far as best arms in the league.
Yeah, no, when he's going, forget it. You'll literally take him up against anybody. It's just I agree with you there. This season there have been less of that than we've seen in previous seasons. And I'll throw this in there too, Doug, and not to bring this too much to a grinding halt. This could be the last game he ever plays for the Rams. There's that part of it too, that obviously he's still playing at a high level. I would imagine that he wants to get paid like a lot of the quarterbacks in the league are getting paid. They had a little bit of a standoff coming into this season, and at the last minute they got something done. And I remember you and I were talking about it leading up to it, and I said to you, there is no circumstance that I see where Matthew Stafford isn't the quarterback of this team in 2024. There's no circumstance where there's going to be a holdout or anything. I'm not saying that this time around. I don't think that's true. I think that this could become contentious. I think that this could become difficult to, certainly depending on the result of this game, but throw that in the mix too, that, I'm sure he wants to go out with a bang. I'm sure that he knows that, look, if they make a run, it's far more likely that the Rams give him whatever he wants. It's far more likely that he can go get that deal, that $50 million or whatever it is that he has his eye on. If you get cracked and you get run over, you lose in the first round again, second year in a row, then you probably are making a different decision. So there's a whole bunch on the line as far as Matthew Stafford goes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love me some cold hard truths, and look, that's just a fact, right? I mean, this is the last dance that no one's really talking about it potentially, right? I mean, Aaron Donald's already retired. Cooper Kupp is where he's at, and Matthew Stafford. There is a universe where this could be kind of last of an era of that core group. I do think, though, like you, that the Rams do end up winning this game. They do surprise some folks, and that there's also a chance where he is back too. So, but a lot of it depends on this game. And this, just like, it's funny too, because you look at the flip side, and Sam Darnold almost the same way, right? I mean, Sam Darnold is almost playing for his future with the Vikings, as crazy as it sounds for someone that was an MVP candidate this season.
Yeah, Darnold's in a similar situation for a different reason, right? Like he's kind of revitalized his career and has clearly shown that he's a capable NFL starting quarterback. They just drafted a rookie quarterback in Minnesota and J.J. McCarthy, so they can't do both of those things at the same time. You can't develop the guy you drafted in the first round and give a veteran like Darnold the money that I'm sure he's looking for. So I think one of those two guys has to probably move, and I would imagine that they'll keep the cheaper option with the higher upside maybe in McCarthy. But, Matthew Stafford's in a little bit of a different situation just because he's on the wrong side of 35. We see him with Aaron Rodgers now. The closer you get to 40, the less chances there are of you kind of rediscovering it. He has had a bit of an uneven season a little bit. So, this is an opportunity to not just win a playoff game, but an opportunity to maybe run it back with the Rams or not. So there's a bunch on the line for this guy.
Exactly. It's definitely a deeper subplot. Almost reminds me of kind of when Aaron Donald walked off the field after they lost to the Lions and he said, "I'm done," or "I'm full," right? He kind of made it known then, and kind of makes you think what's in Matthew Stafford's mind kind of in this playoffs entering it. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the Week 8 matchup where the Rams really played their best game. Matthew Stafford had his best game of the season, and can we take anything from that game and what's going to be different this time around? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs, of course they're better with FanDuel. Of course they are, right? Because right now, new customers, you bet $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, right? That's guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and so much more. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the line has moved. The Vikings were about 1.5 favorite when the game's scheduled to be at SoFi. Last I looked, that had moved to about 3.5. So go ahead and check the numbers at FanDuel as well. But that line has moved since the Rams got that game moved from SoFi into the desert in Arizona. So visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That is FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel. And of course, they are an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, Travis. So I'm a sicko, so I rewatched the Week 8 win over the Vikings. The Rams win 30-20. You've said it throughout the year. It's really the best you've seen this Rams team play. Matthew Stafford, 3 touchdowns. Puka Nacua comes back. But the question I had was, what would be different? Because that game really sparked the comeback for the Rams this season. The Rams would go on to go 6-3. They win the NFC West after that. And the Vikings, they went on to win 10 of their next 11 games. It was really interesting to hear what Brian Flores said about how they were thrown off that Puka Nacua played in that game. And Puka, for the good game they did have, played in 50% of the snaps, still made a big impact, but just having a full season to really kind of match up with him, it's going to be a different version of the Vikings defense that didn't blitz a ton, and just how they're going to match up with Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I think there's 2 big differences between this game and the time that they met earlier in the season. And unfortunately, D-Mac, I think both of them work against the Rams. So the one is what you just mentioned, was the fact that Puka, I don't want to say it was a surprise activation right before that game, but like you mentioned, Brian Flores had said, we really had not prepared to deal with him. And then at the last minute, he was in the game. So, if you get a player of Puka Nacua's caliber that kind of catches you by surprise, that's a big advantage. I think the Rams took advantage of it. The second part of this is TJ Hawkinson did not play in that first game for the Vikings. He's a really good player. And if you're going to double cover Justin Jefferson, and I would suggest that you probably should because he's Justin Jefferson, that means that TJ Hawkinson is going to be left alone. That means that you're going to have to cover him with a linebacker, an end, or something. And that feels like a very bad deal. You've heard me say this a million times that Michael Hoyt in coverage is not my favorite thing in the world. And usually that's a result of blitzing, and the blitz doesn't get home, and Hoyt's not able to cover whoever it is he needs to cover. Hawkinson's a good player, and somebody's going to, they did not have him the first time. So the element of surprise of Puka is gone. They've added another weapon in Hawkinson, but even though those two things kind of point towards Minnesota, I still think the Rams are in a pretty good spot. I think this is just one of those things, we want to use a boxing analogy, styles make fights. And I think this is a good matchup for the Rams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way that these two teams match up, like you said in the first part of the show, it's probably going to be a close game, and you're going to have to execute in the fourth quarter, as cliche as that sounds. But I'll also throw in on the defensive side, too, for the Vikings getting back Blake Cashman, because Blake Cashman is one of the big reasons why Brian Flores wasn't pressuring as much. I mean, he pressured Stafford less than 12% of the time, around 11.8%. Cashman is their dude they use to disrupt, to create some havoc along the blitzing and what he does in the backfield. And he's fourth among linebackers, 28 pressures, third in quarterback hits. He's going to have to be accounted for. So you get Hawkinson, like you mentioned, you get Cashman back, and the $1 million question, too, defending Justin Jefferson. If you bracket Justin Jefferson, you give single coverage to TJ Hawkinson. You give single coverage potentially to Jordan Addison, who up until last week's loss was really on a hot streak. So it's kind of a pick your poison, but I think if you can take anything away from another game in the Lions' success against the Vikings is if you get to Sam Darnold and you pressure him, well, that's the key to really starting to neutralize Justin Jefferson, because late in those plays, he was open, but by the time he was open, you already saw Darnold was uncomfortable. He was on the turf. So that's going to be big too. Can this Rams pass rush create pressure? So that way, if you are shadowing Justin Jefferson, if you are bracketing him, that you're trying to limit him, because they got 115 catches, 115 yards on 8 catches in their first matchup.
I think there's two things that are taken on. They're the same thing on different sides of the ball, right? I think you're exactly right. The Rams pass rush has to get home and make Darnold make decisions before he wants to. That's what the Lions were able to do, and hopefully the Rams can, whether it's the same schematics or not, I don't know if that really matters. And the result needs to be the same. Can Jared Verse, can Byron Young, can the Rams pass rush get home in time to make him uncomfortable? I think the opposite on the other side is true as well. I hope the Vikings blitz. I hope they send everybody at Matthew Stafford. I love Matthew Stafford when it's up to him to make a good decision. He's one of those guys that's been around such a long time. You're not going to trick him. And if the game is you're going to force him into getting rid of the ball quick, good, because I think that he's going to win that matchup far more often than he's not. I like him getting the ball out of his hands quickly. I like him getting to kind of look at it and know where that rush is coming from and knowing where the option is right there. Because if you can beat the blitz, there are opportunities down the field. And I'll take my chances with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford in that matchup all day long. If the game comes down to which quarterback has to make decisions quickly, I'll take number 9 over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that gives me confidence in this one is just how Darnold's looked in the last couple games of the season, their ineffectiveness in the red zone. I mean, if he gets back to playing like he did when he was really surging this year, it's a different story, but I think you're catching the Vikings really at a good time, if we're being completely honest. And also, too, I want to point out that since the NFL went to a 14-team playoff, there have been 9 rematches, non-division rematches, and the home team is 7-2. Of course, it's a home team, right? Only by uniforms and hopefully by fan support. And the winner of the first meeting is 5-4. So it's there's just kind of, I've seen on X and I've seen on people like, oh, by the way, I hate calling it X, man. I still call it Staples Center. Like, that'll never feel good to me. It doesn't feel good. I don't feel good, you know?
Do what makes you feel good, Doug.
Yeah.
I'm a Twitter guy. I'm a Staples Center guy. I'm not crypto and I'm not Xing. No.
I hate it. I have a segment called Designated Twitter, and I'm like, now I got to change that. Like, whatever. But I just want to point out, a lot of people say it's hard to beat a team twice. And while that applies in a lot of different ways, the truth is that the home team in these rematches, when it's twice in a season, in the playoff format that's been 14 teams, that team tends to win that game. So the truth is that it's the other way around. But we'll have a couple more times to preview this matchup. We'll be back Monday. Might do something over the weekend, too. We'll see what we do. Yep. But anything changes, we'll definitely watch for an episode. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams House?